Hey guys! Under my last video, I've been asked to cover Steel Soul by ImNotNuub. So, this is exactly what we'll be doing today. Let's take a look at some nice glow and learn how to build in this style ourselves. Buckle up, get ready, let's go! So the colors, at least on the surface level, really aren't that complicated here. You'll see that as we move throughout the first section, it's just a lot of pulses, but it's always, pretty much always, hues of blue. This section also stays pretty monothematic. It's pretty much just and only flashes of violet, all the way up until we get to the drop. And on the drop, once we get here, well, we'll start changing colors much more frequently. You'll see that we are alternating between orange and violet, and then again orange, and then like this more of a actually pink hue, and then again orange, and then once we get somewhere, not yet here, this is going to switch from alternating between those two colors into other two colors. So here we see green, and then blue, and then green, and then blue, and so on and so forth. And I want to highlight the lesson that comes from that. And that is that while creating in this specific rendition of glow, we shouldn't actually change our primary color all that often. And that is until we get to the drop, where we kind of change our approach, which also kind of reflects what a drop should be, really energetic and dynamic and so on. So now that we roughly know what we're doing, let's look at how this works in practice. Well, the first color change we'll see here is this color trigger here for the background. And this goes from the direct black that we're starting with as the level starts. This, over the course of, well, 2 seconds, this goes towards this dark black. And if we look at it from the color picker, you'll see that it's really dark here on the brightness scale. And it's a little bit more towards saturation than just white. And once we arrive at this color, so this is more or less here, this is more or less the color we're getting. And then in here, we are changing that color onto the same color. So again, I want to highlight that this is the same color if we look at the hue value here. It's right between the very, very, very powerful blue and the sky blue, and the same color is being used here, right in between those two blue hues, except it has different saturation and different brightness. So we are pulsing towards that color, and then this pulse stays in for just a second. And it has no hold, it has no fade in, it just happens immediately and then slowly progresses back towards this color. And we do that each accent in the music. Bam, 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 bam. That said, if you just set up those background pulses, your background won't actually look nearly as good at all. And why is that? Well, that is because there is a selection of gradient triggers that are affecting how this scene is rendered. And they make any changes to the background color actually follow through with a whole lot of interesting changes. And so I've set up this empty level, which has those exact, pretty much, not entirely exact colors applied. So here we have this blue, and then here we have this brighter blue. This is how it looks without any shaders. Pretty tame, nothing too interesting. So the first thing you'll have to do is go ahead and in the ground, you'll just copy color of channel ID background. So literally just ground becomes the color of the background. And then in ground 2, what you'll do is you'll just choose black. And then you can make the line invisible in any way you'd like, which is either just making it black or making it opacity 0.0 or making it blending and then black, whatever works for you. And so, how are those gradient triggers set up? Well, for the first one, you'll use the normal blending mode, so this will just overwrite background color. I'll just uncheck it, and you'll target the background color here, just in the case you don't have that selected. And then in Edit Object, the first color for the base will be just black, and then the other color will be just copy of the background color, and this is not blending. Now, if we just enable this, you'll see that we already get something that's far closer to what we want, but it's not glowing, it's not blending, it's not cool. So, to follow up, we'll also, and make sure you click the plus here, so the ID is different, otherwise you'll just overwrite your first effect. The blending here will be additive. This means that this works far more like blending colors, so this just adds color instead of overriding it. And again, we're choosing the background mode. I'll uncheck the touch trigger. And the colors we'll be using here is again the black, which with additive doesn't mean black, it instead just means invisible in this case, because adding black adds nothing. And in here, in the other color, what we're gonna be using is again a copy of background, but this time it's blending. Okay, starts looking somewhat interesting, but there is two more to make it really pop. And that's where we add the same thing, similar thing, to the max color. This is just, this is the color of basically everything, every pixel on your screen. So I'm going to uncheck touch trigger here, and again, make sure you add a new ID. And then in the edit object, we're again choosing black for the base, so no base, invisible. And then again, just blending copy of background for the other color. We are starting to see this is kind of like affecting our screen a little bit. This pulse trigger is kind of like brightened up, especially as it approaches like the bottom of the screen. But there is one more, so it really starts to pop quite aggressively actually. And that is, again, new ID, make sure you do that. Again, the max color is being affected, and again, we're choosing the additive mode. And in here, we are adding the same color as the background, blending, and with 45 hue added. That's quite a bit of hue actually. I would add maybe 30, but it seems the creator of this level decided that 45 will be the value. So, if we're on blue, then it adds a little bit of violet. And it's going to basically always go ahead and add a little bit, make it go a little bit down on this hue scale here. And with that, we get a premium feeling hue effect by basically just throwing in a few gradients and nothing else. As a fun little experiment, I decided to add this very effect to my 1.9 styled level that's upcoming. And it doesn't work so well there, but it does kind of let you envision for yourself how it interacts with different scenes and different colors. So now that we have colors nailed down, let's talk about what we have here in terms of block design. There is two sub-styles that we'll go through here. The first one is shown here on the part we've already looked at a whole bunch during the video. And that's the style where we'll have those background blocks here that pulse alongside the background and pulse really powerfully, and those glass resembling blocks that pulse far more often that seem to be in front. That's the first style. It's used all the time pre-drop, and then once we get to the drop, we'll start using the other block design, which uses a whole lot more of glass resembling blocks here on the top, and then combines them in seemingly random shapes with pitch black blocks with patterns. Let's break those down one by one. So let's start breaking this block down by looking at layer 1. Here, we'll find that there is a whole bunch of blocks, and actually all of those have collision. It's those ones. It's not those ones. I actually expected the latter, but what we'll see is those, and let's roll with that. Let's see what they're made of. So as the main color, we'll just have basically invisible black next to invisible black, And you can see this, that our lines here are, well, next to invisible. But if you look really closely, they're here. They make the edge slightly, ever so slightly darker. And then for the detail color, what we're doing is we're simply copying the background color with 45 hue. And this is a color we actually already have if you've done the background plot. So this is going to start pulsing alongside our background, but it's not going to pulse quite enough, at least according to the designer of this level. Here on layer 16, we'll find that there is actually some more glow that's put into this block, and that's just more or less where it collides, where it makes sense for glow to be thrown in, and that makes our block, as it pulses, pulse way more powerfully, essentially going all the way towards pitch white. Next up, on the blocks that pulse alongside the background, so the ones that are a little bit behind from the perspective side, we'll add those pad blocks as just decoration really. And those are actually made out of 3 pad blocks per a pad block. The first one being fully visible, then the other one which has its visibility halved, and then the last one which only has 0.25 of its original color. But that's not it for those background blocks. Here, on layer 9, what we'll see is those barely at all visible pattern blocks from 1.9, which actually have half of their color entirely removed, and then only make the details visible. And even those are barely visible at all, only at 0.1 of the entire opacity. And then this is just made up of those. You might recognize them, I'd be really surprised if you don't. And also there is this little accent here out of those little pulsating blocks that you might also recognize from the details tab. Right here. That's the one. And then here on the other group, not meant to do that, we'll see there is also those, just again a little bit of added depth to the block. And this is just let to be still on the object color. So now let's understand our foreground blocks, the ones that pulse far more often. Those on the layer 1 will actually be pretty much the same thing, just using a different color. So for both base and the detail, they'll be using the copy of object that blending. And then as we move over to layer 8, here is this actually just default animated cube we might find in the monsters tab. This is a very interesting use of this block, and how we're using it is we're just removing the base color altogether, and then only letting the detail color slightly kind of like make this impression of something moving from left to right. And then we're just adding a little bit more of edit special to make this faster than it usually is. Now we just have to look at the rest. So first, on layer 2, we'll find lines. Lines are left on their default, so object color. This is not blending. This is one of the not many things here that are not blending. And this will just resemble the shapes of our background and foreground blocks. This is nothing crazy. Then we'll get the same, or rather a similar thing, from those thicker outlines, which you find in the same tab, right here. And those will have a color of a 0.35 visibility of black. So now all that's left to talk about is the remaining glows we'll find in those designs. And the first one is only ever to be present on our blocks that are in the foreground, the ones that pulse far more often. And this is actually made out of 3 different glow blocks for a single tile. So let's move them around and look at what they are. The first one will be using object color with 45 hue applied, and the other 2 will be using again object color and again with 45 hue applied, but this time we are using the blending. Then the remaining glows here that decorate the top part of each part of the block do a similar thing, except without adding 45 hue. So again, we'll see the one that has no blending, we'll see the one that has blending. Let's just shortcut to the next. And the last piece of glow that we'll be looking at, or in this case actually the last piece of shadow that we'll be looking at, is on layer 6. And that is glow blocks that are on a half visible color black. And what they do is they make it seem as if the blocks in the foreground are casting a shadow on the block in the background. And with that, what we're getting is that illusion of them actually being in front. One more thing to mention here is that once the block become quite big, we're not just making them super huge and making them go on for hours on end. What we're doing instead is if we're adding this layer of bottom pitch black blocks, which also features some spikes, and those also come with a little bit of a hard shadow part, as they switch onto what's the part of an actual block design. So now let's get onto the second design we have. And surprisingly, I think this one might actually be slightly easier. So first, at layer 1, we'll find those glass blocks, and they're tupled together. A whole lot of things are tupled together here. So what I'll do is I'll just separate this and take this all the way where nothing else is making us worry. And now I'll untuple it, and let's see what we're running here. So first, just a normal outline block on the object color, and then a bunch of lines also on the object color. Everything here is set up in a way that makes us have a full square that's 3D and actually also transparent. And then there's also this thicker line, which is again on 0.5 of the black color's visibility. Then on layer 2, we have the exact same thing. So again, a tupled together full square that's 3D, so I'll untuple it, and let's see what's inside. This uses the color that's literally just a copy of background, and again, blending. Pretty simple stuff. And then the last part that makes a single square complete is simply more glow. Both of those use object color with 45 hue added, and again blending, but they're also making themselves brighter by an entire 100%. So let's bring this cube back to our contraption and look at what makes things unique here. First of all, as we scroll over to layer 16, 15, we'll find that some of the blocks have an additional black square here. It also often enough comes with a spike. Other than that, there's also those stars, and they don't even feature any more glow. They're just here and they make this awesome. And then for our solid blocks, they start off using the obvious base, which is just pitch black. Again, surprisingly, not background blocks, but just fully collisioned pitch black blocks, which also have a base, so the line color of white that's basically invisible at 0.3 brightness. Then at layer 5, we'll find a lot of 3D lines, and those had to be done custom then. It's not as easy as with the glass blocks here, but it's nothing crazy. Then on layer 6, we find a layer of glow, which overlays, it's actually on layer T2, it overlays over some of the other lines which we haven't seen yet. And then lastly on group 15, we find those exact lines. And those are pretty random. It seems like this is just a pattern you come up with yourself here. It may feature some of the path blocks here, but mostly it's just literally the empty line block. And it's actually the disappearing kind, which is fun. And afterwards, all that's left is to add some of more those path blocks. And again, we are doing that trick where we are adding some more for perspective on 0.5 visibility. The first piece of air decoration we'll talk about is those background building blocks that happen to be behind all of our playable, actually collidable blocks. So let's jump into the layer 12 here and look at what we're made of. So there is two layers to this. First there is the layer that's an actual building block, and then there is just a background block that's a normal block, no pattern here, and it's slightly warped, so it's higher, so it's bigger, kind of like that. So for the first one, the color is the background color without blending, and it only has 50% brightness. And then for the other one, what's happening is we're using the object color directly, and then with 0.30 brightness. Another subtle piece of decoration we'll find is those wave blocks, and this really is nothing crazy. You can find those direct ones in the details tab, and you can just place them. And the color for those is just black with 0.20 of its original opacity. Afterwards we have the format's all-star, which is the arrow that points towards the direction of the gameplay. But I just want to briefly touch upon the glow blocks that make it up. So there is a lot of glow blocks here. Very big ones, medium-sized ones, all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some of them use different colors. This one has blending background copy with 0.5 opacity. Then this one has also blending background with 0.5 opacity, but this one has object color, also blending and with 0.5 opacity. So what the author was aiming for here is that this pulses slightly or slightly more powerfully with both of the different pulsating effects that we are seeing in the scene as the level moves forward. Another super cool and incredibly original element of the air decoration here is those closely undescribable gloves that we'll start seeing as we move over to the drop. I have taken a few out of those out of the gameplay area, and let's take a look at what they're made of. So first, there's those blocks. You'll find them in the source tab right here. And there's actually two of them copy and pasted here. As you can see, one is like behind the other one. And then just a simple circle, which you'll also find in the same tab. And then those two, they are set to copy the background color, but they have their brightness overridden onto 0.10, both of them. And then this one has the same thing applied. And then apparently this looks perfectly fine. Now for the bigger ones, you'll also notice there's this big glow block here in the middle of them. And they're also warped in a way that will make them kind of like feel interesting. So you can really achieve like just about any shape with this. Periodically, you'll also encounter those little animated stars here, and those are located in the Monsters tab right here. And we of course can't forget the sawblades. I've taken the same one a little bit towards the top here, and let's break it down. So this is made out of, first of all, this sawblade here, and then also this transparent one overlaid on top. And then we have a lot of glow using all sorts of combinations of those colors, some with 45 hue added, some less visible, some more visible. Then there's also this circle, which is at 0.15 visibility of color black. Then there is a smaller circle that copies the background color, and then there's a super small circle here lastly that's just pitch black. Combine all of that and you'll get a pretty nice result. Another super small detail to mention that I still feel like it's worth mentioning is those pixel blocks you'll find on our surfaces. The base color is at 0.10 of the black color, and then the detail color is at half of the black color visibility. It's just a neat little thing. we're going back into the background territory for a second, because there is a few things here that I haven't looked at yet. And those are the selections of those particle effects. In this case, this is like 9 or 10 actually here. If we go ahead and copy that and take it somewhere much further towards the top, you'll see that there is so many different sizes of this particle effect in here. And all of them move their particles towards the left, have a lifetime of somewhere between 3 to 5 seconds, have some variable durations that follow the parallax effect, making sure that the ones that are the closest to the player move the fastest, and also are the biggest. And they'll all be using textures starting with this one, then moving over to this one, then to this one, and then the biggest ones will be using this texture instead. Then in the background we also have those stretched clouds. And what you'll notice is that some of them are on either of those 3 groups respectively. And those 3 groups just quote-unquote randomize their speed of movement alongside the player and their visibility. 37 moves closer to the original camera's movement, and then 38 moves nearly perfectly alongside the camera and is visible the least. Alright, and that's all I have for you today. Hopefully this has been useful and made you learn some new techniques that you might be able to use in your glow levels. Or whether you just watched this because you'd like to see something that someone did and how they did it. Whichever is the case, I'm glad you got this far in the video. If you've enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing. That's going to help me reach more people like you and help them out get better at building. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!